When my daughter laughed, it didn't sound human to me. It cut through the phone like something sharp, something that didn't belong in a conversation about her mother. I only said her name, just her mother's name. And the sound that came back was a cold, little laugh, the kind people make when they hear a joke they don't respect. I went still. My hand tightened around the phone until the plastic creaked. For a second, I wondered if I had heard it wrong, but she said it again, like the memory of her mother was nothing more than a punchline she had grown tired of. I didn't say anything at first. I couldn't. My mind froze in the space between disbelief and pain. I tried to imagine any version of my daughter who would find humor in the woman who gave her life. But all I heard was the distance in her voice, the kind that takes years to grow, the kind you only notice when it's already too late. She talked fast, irritated, brushing off the past as if none of it mattered. I waited for her tone to soften, even a little, the way it used to when she remembered who raised her. It never came. I felt something inside me shift, like the ground moving under old roots. That laugh wasn't new. It was the result of a slow turning, a slow forgetting. Someone had helped her build a world where her mother meant nothing and where I was nothing but a burden. I could almost hear another voice behind her words, shaping them, feeding her bitterness. I didn't know who, not yet, but influence like that always leaves fingerprints. When she finished talking, she didn't ask if I was all right. She didn't even notice my silence. She just changed the subject the way people change a channel. Quick, careless, like my feelings were background noise she didn't owe attention to. I tried to steer the conversation back, to remind her of the woman she used to cry for in the middle of the night. But she sighed, like I was dragging her into something she had outgrown. After the call ended, I sat at the kitchen table with my phone still warm in my hand. Outside, the evening was settling, the kind that used to bring us together, the kind where her mother would light a candle and ask how our daughter's day was. I thought of that quiet cemetery on the hill, the one my daughter never visits, and I felt a weight settle in my chest. I've paid for that grave for 12 years. I've kept it clean in every season. I've carried the memory alone because she refuses to carry even a piece of it. I don't understand how a child forgets the person who held her, fed her, shielded her. I don't understand how she laughs at a name that once made her reach out for comfort. But maybe you can tell me. Has anyone ever mocked something sacred to you? I have cared for her grave for 12 years, and I can tell you every stone, every line, every season that has passed over it. I go there the way some people go to church, not out of habit, but out of a promise I made the day we laid her to rest. I told her I would keep her memory alive, even if no one else did. I didn't know then how literal that promise would become. The first year after her passing, our daughter still came with me. She would stand there holding a small bouquet, fingers trembling, eyes red. She used to whisper things to the headstone, things she didn't want me to hear. I never asked what they were. I thought grief needed space. I thought time would bring us closer. Instead, time decided to pull us apart. By the second year, she stopped coming. She always had a reason: school, work, friends, too busy, too tired, maybe next week. At first, I believed her. Then I realized she wasn't avoiding the cemetery. She was avoiding the memory of the woman who shaped her. The distance didn't happen in one moment. It came in small pieces, tiny choices that went unnoticed until the pattern became too clear. Still, I kept going. Every month I paid the maintenance fee. Every visit I brought fresh flowers, even when the wind was sharp enough to sting my face. I cleaned the marker with my own hands, brushing off leaves in fall, wiping away pollen in spring, clearing snow when the frost settled too thick. I spoke to her in a low voice, telling her the things our daughter no longer wanted to hear. Updates about life, small stories from the days that passed too quietly. I remember one winter morning when the cold cut through my coat. The sky was white, the kind of white that makes everything seem still. I placed a single white rose on her grave and thought about how our daughter hadn't been there in years, not even on the anniversary. Not on birthdays, not on the day we used to celebrate as a family. It was like she had folded up her mother's memory and locked it away somewhere, out of sight, out of mind. After her mother's death, something in her changed. At first, it was small things, short answers, avoiding conversation, withdrawing from anything that reminded her of home. Then the changes grew sharper. She stopped asking about the traditions her mother loved. She stopped acknowledging the things I did to keep those traditions going. It was as if she believed forgetting would make the pain easier. But forgetting didn't heal her. It hardened her. I have wondered if someone encouraged her to let the past go. Maybe a partner, maybe a friend, maybe the world itself telling her that grief is something to box up instead of carry. But you can't erase a person by ignoring the places they touched. And yet that's exactly what she tried to do with her mother. Sometimes I stand at the grave and think, do our children remember the people who raised them? Or only the versions they choose to believe? I didn't plan the visit. It wasn't one of those moments where a father decides to give a speech or demand answers. I was driving past her neighborhood, and something inside me, maybe worry, maybe habit, told me to turn onto her street. I had a small container of her mother's favorite soup on the seat beside me, still warm. I thought she might appreciate it, or at least understand the gesture. Grief is carried in strange ways, and I kept hoping some part of her still cared about the things we once shared. When I pulled up to her building, the first thing I noticed was the stack of unopened mail wedged against her doorframe. Envelopes bent and curled, a couple marked "Final Notice," a faint sign of strain. The blinds were uneven, pulled halfway down as if someone yanked them in a hurry. The porch light, if you could even call it that, flickered like it hadn't been replaced in months. It all made my heart sink a little lower. I knocked, not loud, not demanding, just the knock of a father checking on his child. For a moment, nothing happened. Then I heard footsteps approach and pause. The door opened only a crack, the chain still hooked. Her partner's face appeared, expression flat, voice clipped. "She's busy," he said, not even attempting to be polite. "I just wanted to bring her something," I replied, lifting the container slightly. He didn't look at it, didn't look at me. "She doesn't need anything from you," he said. His tone carried the certainty of someone who had rehearsed that line. He started to close the door, but then she appeared behind him, just far enough that I could see the outline of her face. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her voice tired and hard at the same time. Not surprised, annoyed. "I was in the area," I said. "Thought I'd check in?" She shook her head, arms crossed like she was holding herself together. "You don't have to keep pretending you ever did anything for me." That sentence hit me harder than the door ever could. I felt it settle in my chest, heavy and cold. "You know that's not true," I said quietly. She shrugged, eyes avoiding mine. "You were never really there, not the way you think." Her partner smirked like he owned the conversation. "We're fine on our own," he added, his tone edging into something dismissive, almost mocking. I looked past them, into the dim room behind the chain. The lights were off, except for a weak lamp. A shut-off notice lay on the table. Something was clearly wrong, but she didn't want me to see it, or she didn't want to admit she needed help. "I'll go," I said, because staying would only tighten the walls she had already built. She didn't answer. She just let her partner close the door. The click of the latch sounded too final for a simple visit. Walking back to my car, the soup still warm in my hand, I felt something shift inside me. Not just sadness, but suspicion. Someone was rewriting her memories, reshaping her anger, turning me into the villain she believed I had always been. "Would you knock again, or walk away?" The envelope looked like any other piece of mail, thin, cream-colored, with my name typed neatly in the center. But the moment I saw the return address, something inside me tightened. The cemetery, the place where I buried the woman who held our family together, the woman our daughter now treated like a forgotten chapter in a book she no longer wanted to read. I opened it slowly, hoping it was a routine notice, maybe a reminder for seasonal upkeep. But the paper inside told a different story. "Past due balance," it read across the top, bold and heavy. The amount wasn't huge, but it wasn't small either. Big enough to sting, but what hurt more was the line right below it. "Payment method declined. Primary payer inactive." Her mother's name was still listed on the account, but the contact information wasn't mine. Someone had changed it. Someone had removed the old automatic payment setup years ago, and the cemetery had been trying to reach a number that no longer existed. Then, after failed attempts, they forwarded the notice to the only living contact still associated with the grave, me. I sat down at the kitchen table, the letter trembling a little in my hand. Why would the account change? Why would anyone interfere with something so sacred, so rooted in family? I called the cemetery office, my voice steadier than the churn in my chest. When the staff member pulled up the file, I could hear her confusion through the phone. "Sir, it appears someone updated the contact number and email 3 years ago. It's not yours." "No," I said quietly. "And the automatic payment tied to your wife's name was removed a year after that." We assumed the family wanted to handle payments manually. My stomach dropped. When was the last payment made? There was a short pause, just long enough to make the air feel heavier. Almost 5 years ago, she said. We haven't had a visit from the listed next of kin since then either. 5 years. 5 years of me visiting her grave, brushing away leaves, placing flowers, kneeling in silence while my daughter pretended the place didn't exist. 5 years of fees stacking quietly in the background until they finally reached me. I asked the staff member if she could send me the record of who changed the account information. She explained it wasn't a signature-based change, just someone calling in, claiming to be family, giving new contact details. No verification beyond the basics, nothing illegal on their side. Just sloppy policy that allowed the wrong person to erase my connection to my wife's resting place. And I knew, without being told, who that person was. I leaned back in my chair, the letter on the table in front of me like a small, cruel reminder. This wasn't just distance. This wasn't just anger or hurt feelings. This was someone letting me carry the full weight of a duty we once shared. Silently, without thanks, without acknowledgement, without even the decency to tell me they'd walked away. In that moment, the betrayal shifted. It wasn't emotional anymore. It was practical, calculated, exploitive. Should someone abandon responsibilities tied to family legacy? I sat in the small conference room at the attorney's office, staring at the framed certificates lining the wall. Elder abuse and estate law, those were the specialties printed on every document. I never imagined I would need someone like this. I thought caring for my family, even after death, was something I could manage on my own. But betrayal has a way of forcing you into places you never expected to stand. The attorney walked in with a quiet confidence, the kind that doesn't need to be announced. She shook my hand firmly, studied my face for a moment, then took a seat. "Tell me what brings you in today," she said. I laid it all out, every detail. The past due cemetery notice, the altered contact information, the missing payments, the phone call with cemetery staff. As I spoke, she didn't interrupt. She didn't blink. She just listened, pen moving steadily across her pad. When I finished, she took the printed records I brought and examined them carefully. Her eyes paused at the updated contact line. "This was changed 3 years ago?" she asked. "Yes." "And not by you?" "No," I said. "I didn't even know it happened." She set the papers down and folded her hands. "What you're describing isn't just disrespectful. It can fall under unauthorized access and potential financial exploitation. Changing billing information tied to a deceased person's estate without proper authority is serious." The words hit harder than I expected. Serious, unauthorized, exploitation. I had felt the betrayal emotionally, but hearing the legal weight behind it made it heavier, more real. She continued, her tone steady and unshaken. "The cemetery allowed verbal changes without verification. That's their negligence. But whoever made the call knowingly removed your connection to your wife's account. That's intentional. Depending on the state, this can open the door to charges or restitution claims." I ran a hand over my face. "She knew I was paying," I said quietly. "She knew I cared, but she removed me anyway." The attorney nodded. "People rewrite history when it benefits them, but the law doesn't operate on memory. It operates on facts." She tapped the papers. "These are facts." A sharp, painful clarity settled in my chest. My daughter hadn't just walked away from her mother's memory. She had tried to erase me from it too. "What should I do?" I asked, my voice low. Her answer came without hesitation. "First, we file a complaint with the cemetery for failing to verify changes. Second, we request their call logs to identify who made the updates. Third, we document every payment you've made for the grave upkeep. Finally, we consider a formal investigation into unauthorized access or estate interference." She looked at me, her expression softening just enough to show she understood the emotional weight behind all this. "This isn't just about money," she added. "It's about protecting someone who can't speak for herself anymore." My throat tightened. She was right. My wife couldn't defend her own memory. That responsibility was mine, even if it meant taking action against the daughter we raised together. I nodded slowly. "Do whatever needs to be done," I said. "I won't let anyone erase her." "Would you take action to protect someone who can no longer speak for themselves?" I didn't go there to start a fight. I went because I needed answers, straight, honest answers, from the child I raised and the man she chose. I stood on her porch with the documents in my hand, the ones the attorney highlighted and explained. The sky was gray, the kind of color that matches the weight you carry inside your chest. I knocked, steady but firm, and waited. She opened the door halfway, her arms crossed, eyes already tired of me. "What now?" she asked, like I was a stranger selling something she didn't want. I held out the papers. "These are the cemetery records," I said. "The ones showing the contact information changed. The ones showing the payments stopped coming from your account years ago." She glanced at them but didn't reach. A small laugh slipped out, dismissive, sharp. "You're really here about that? About dirt and flowers?" My jaw tightened. "It's about your mother. It's about respect." She rolled her eyes. "You always make everything bigger than it is." Before I could speak again, her partner stepped behind her, leaning on the doorframe like he owned the house. His face carried that same cold smirk he always wore. "Why don't you just pay your little bills and leave her alone?" he said. "You act like she owes you something." I looked between them, feeling the floor shift under me. "She owes honesty," I said, "and she owes her mother's memory more than a laugh." My daughter crossed her arms tighter. "You're blowing all this out of proportion. The cemetery messed something up. It's not my fault." But I knew it wasn't a mistake. The attorney made that clear. The call records would soon make it undeniable. I took a breath. Someone changed the account information. Someone removed my name. Someone decided I'd pay for everything without ever being told. I deserved the truth. Her partner chuckled. "Truth? You're too old to understand how things work now." That was the moment my anger turned into something heavier, something colder. The kind of silence that comes when you finally see a person without the excuses you've been making for them. I didn't yell. I didn't push. I simply said, "I already filed a complaint. They're reviewing the records, and investigators will want to talk to both of you." The smirk on her partner's face faded. My daughter's eyes widened just enough to let me know the reality had finally cracked through her denial. "You involved the police?" she asked, voice trembling between shock and anger. "I did," I said. "Because this isn't misunderstanding anymore. This is intentional." Just then, a patrol car turned the corner and slowed. An officer stepped out, radio clipped to his shoulder, approaching with calm steps. "Are you the one who filed the report?" he asked me. My daughter backed up. Her partner stiffened. "Yes," I said, "I am." The officer took my statement again, then asked to speak with them. They both hesitated, caught between arrogance and fear. As I walked away, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt broken, but clear. The truth was finally standing at their door, even if they had never opened it for me. Does their reaction sound innocent to you? Courtrooms have a way of stripping people down to who they really are. There's no place to hide behind quick excuses, no door to slam, no mocking laugh to escape into. Just truth, spoken under oath, with the weight of the law pressing down on every word. When I walked into that room, I carried no pride, only the quiet hope that someone, finally, would acknowledge what had been done, not just to me, but to her mother's memory. The charges were read calmly, almost coldly, but each one felt like a stone dropping into deep water. Unauthorized access, financial exploitation, misrepresentation of account ownership. I kept my eyes forward, hands tight around the folder that held every document I had gathered. Across the aisle, my daughter stared ahead, rigid, while her partner shifted nervously beside her. The prosecutor called the first witness, a representative from the cemetery office. She carried the maintenance logs, payment records, and the digital history of the account. When she confirmed that the contact information had been changed from my name to a number tied to my daughter without my knowledge, something in the courtroom shifted. It wasn't loud, but it was real. A quiet acknowledgement that this wasn't confusion, it was intent. Next came the billing representative. He explained how the system flagged unpaid balances, how the forwarded notices always traced back to my address, because I had been the only consistent payer for years. I watched my daughter's jaw tighten. She didn't look at me. She didn't look at her mother's name on the documents displayed in front of her. The investigator testified last. He spoke plainly, outlining the unauthorized changes, the digital tracks showing the access point, and the lack of any consent from me. His voice didn't shake. Mine almost did when he said, "This pattern fits the legal definition of exploitation." My daughter finally reacted, not with remorse, but with anger. "This is ridiculous," she snapped, loud enough that the judge lifted a hand to quiet her. Her partner muttered something under his breath, but the judge's eyes were firmly on her. "Your father maintained your mother's grave for years," the judge said, voice measured. "Every notice, every fee, every visit. He carried those responsibilities alone, not because he had to, but because he cared. Your actions show not only negligence, but disregard for that devotion. Those words hit harder than anything I expected, not because they condemned her, but because they recognized the one thing I thought the world had forgotten, my love for my late wife and the quiet way I kept her memory alive. By the end of the hearing, the movement toward restitution and formal sentencing was clear. The court was not finished, but the truth was established. No laughter, no dismissal, no rewritten version of history could erase what had happened. When I walked out of the courtroom, the air felt heavier, but clearer. Justice had spoken, slowly, seriously, and with respect for the dead. Do you think the court handled this fairly? The sentencing was delivered without drama, just the steady voice of a judge reading out the consequences of choices my daughter had spent years pretending weren't hers. Restitution was ordered, unauthorized access formally documented. A mandate for financial counseling and community service was added, not out of punishment alone, but to show her the weight of what she tried to ignore. Watching her hear it, I felt no victory, only a quiet settling of something inside me. The truth had finally stood up straight. When I left the courthouse, I didn't go home. I drove straight to the cemetery instead. The road was familiar, the turns memorized, the silence expected. I brought fresh flowers like I always do, trimmed the edges of the small stone, wiped away the dust that had gathered since my last visit. The same tasks I have done for so many years, the ones no one sees or thanks me for, but the ones that anchor me to the woman who stood by me when life was hard and simple at the same time. Standing by her grave, I realized something. I never tended this place for recognition. I never kept her memory alive because I wanted applause or because I needed something in return. I did it because love doesn't end when a heart stops beating. It changes shape, but it doesn't disappear. Maybe my daughter forgot that. Maybe she never understood it in the first place. I used to think she would come back one day, maybe on an anniversary, on a birthday, or on a morning when she felt the pull of memory stronger than pride. But years passed, and she never returned. And now, after everything that happened, I've accepted that she may never find her way back at all. That acceptance doesn't feel like losing her. It feels like finally letting go of a weight I carried for too long. I've set boundaries now, clear ones. She won't have access to my accounts, my decisions, or my time unless she chooses to treat them and me with respect. I won't allow her resentment or the influence of anyone around her to shape my remaining years. I've lived too much life, lost too much, and learned too deeply to hand over my peace again. What I do choose to keep is this: the grave I tend, the memory I honor, the love that shaped the best years of my life. Those things belong to me, and no one can take them away. Not through neglect, not through bitterness, and not through forgotten history. Before I walked away, I placed my hand on the stone, not in mourning, but in gratitude, for the life we built, for the promises kept, for the strength to protect what still matters. Would you forgive someone who laughed at what you still honor?